I love talking to Nikki. She's been a go-to resource for me on the deep dives into ventilation and dehumidification, particularly here in North Carolina and the Southeast, and in high-performance homes, as we are seeing that the better and tighter we make our houses, the more energy efficient they are, our bills are lower, we're more comfortable, but then moisture is a thing that we've always battled here in North Carolina, but maybe we're starting to see it a little differently, and maybe we weren't expecting to battle it in our higher performing homes.
And I hear it all the time. They're making us build our buildings so tight. We never had mold or moisture issues before, but now we do. And it's somebody else is making us do this, and that's not the case. Our buildings are changing, and our equipment and the way we approach this is changing. And we just haven't all kind of kept up with it.
I'm seeing more and more issues that whether we're just getting warmer with climate, or we're just experiencing them more often, or we're just getting really good at our building envelope, is like what you're talking about, this moisture loading that we didn't used to see.
Yeah.
And I will say maybe that is a factor of, we are seeing you guys get a lot better at this. We are getting tighter at our houses. So in a way, having moisture management issues now in a high-performance homes means you're doing a great job. You have hit the next level of building science performance, because you are building in the humid Southeast.
And I say that all the time to builders. It used to be if you needed a dehumidifier, fingers started pointing.
Right.
Somebody
did it wrong.
did something wrong. And the reality is, if you're building a tight envelope, you're bringing in the mechanical ventilation to keep the homeowners healthy. Mm-hmm. You've sized the HVAC system correctly, and you need a dehumidifier. In the Southeast, you really have done everything correctly.
Right.
And it's really the holy grail of ventilation, filtration, and humidity control. Those are your three pillars, right?
Say that one more time. Ventilation,
filtration, and moisture control.
That's what you need.
Those are the three things. And ventilation,
pillars, like a tripod,
and filtration very much are the health, right?
Yes.
They are. And then you add, if we go into dehumidification, not only are you getting the health, but you get the comfort, you get the sustainability, and the durability, and really reputation and liability. Kind of goes with that moisture control aspect as well. So where we see condensation a lot of times will be in vented crawl spaces.
Yes.
Because air does not come in one vent and automatically go out the other vent.
Stay tuned for another section on vented crawl spaces and how there's always going to be a challenge.
But that's a big one, vented crawl spaces. Basements are always going to be, because basically anytime you're going down into the ground, you're going to have vapor pressure, you're going to have low loads, not a lot of air conditioning needed, and then whole house, moisture issues, so we're tightening up, so we're stopping the air from coming in, which means less runtime on our air conditioners.
Right.
Which is the goal, energy efficiency.
Right.
Run the largest system in the house as little as possible.
Exactly. So let's stop there for a second. So we've got our three main areas of the house. We know that if we can control the way air comes in and out of the house, then we've got a better chance of creating a healthier environment by being able to manage the moisture in that area, right?
Yes.
And so we talked about, just to recap, vented crawl spaces. I don't like them. It's always a risk. I'll tell you this forever. But if by sealing our crawl spaces and treating them we're treating them because we want to manage the moisture.
Moisture. That's the only reason.
That's the only reason.
Yep.
So that's it. It's just an easier way to manage moisture in a crawl spaces if you've controlled that air also. And then we went to basements.
Basements.
We know basements are just moist. And the point that I love that you made is you don't have to, the air is cooler down there. So the piece of equipment that we've always relied on to manage moisture doesn't need to run that often if we're doing our jobs really well. Like if I'm doing my job well with my builder partners, then downsizing or not even their air conditioning coming on as little as possible is actually great. That's amazing. That's what we want, is to not have to work so hard to make our air a certain temperature. Yeah. But in the Southeast, what you guys have been asking about, why do I have high relative humidity.
Yep.
And we're going to talk about why dew point is what you really care about there. When you're asking that question, what I hear is, I'm afraid of condensation.
Absolutely.
You know. So why do we have that? And I get that question all the time.
Well, and it's not even just, you might not see condensation and have a mold issue. So there's relative humidity and there's dew point. Relative humidity, high relative humidity in a house results in moisture in the air.
Right.
Which means all of the materials in the house are absorbing that moisture. The drywall.
So high relative humidity, yes, all your materials absorb the moisture, and this is why you may not see it, but that's also why it might be hard to manage. Like, you don't see condensation, but that doesn't mean your furniture, your drywall, your wood can hold a whole lot of moisture. So you may actually end up with what you were talking to me earlier about, was microbial issues.
Yeah.
Because of high relative humidity.
It's
even if you don't
loading.
see it, it's just moisture loading.
Yep, moisture loading. And so,
is this a terrible question? How do you know you have high relative humidity? Like, what's high?
You got to monitor. Monitoring is key.
Okay.
Monitoring is always going to be.
And is that my thermostat that monitors that? Like, what do I monitor with?
Usually a good hygrometer, a quality one, is going to really. There's so much out there, so many different monitoring systems and recording systems right now. Typically, you don't always want a homeowner going out and just buying the cheapest thing, because those sensors can be way off.
Yeah.
So, look into a good monitoring system, and make that part of your package, right?
Yeah.
We care about your indoor air quality, we care about your comfort. We're going to monitor. But if it starts, and it's also a lifestyle thing. I mean, you can do absolutely everything correctly, and there's a lot of little components that add to the relative humidity, right? So
sure, not venting your rain shed outside when you're cooking,
it's
or
it's a homeowner's lifestyle. You can't control people. You can do everything right, and as soon as you put people in, it doesn't.
Oh, always.
But
we make it
ventilation's going to add some.
Yeah.
People are going to add some. Depending on when you close up your home in the construction practice. If it's been really
raining,
wet, you're going to have all building materials are going to be drying for the first couple of years.
Right.
So all of those little things can add up to a lot.
And might not see for a while. You may have closed on that house, and it's a year later that you're fighting these moisture issues, which I've had calls from you guys about. So I know that this happens. So, but what we do recommend is getting some type of hygrometer or moisture monitoring.
Yep. I mean, really, you need to know RH and temp, and to really understand.
A humidistat. Humidity monitor.
It is.
And the ones that come in a lot of our builders use smart thermostats, and they will have a relative humidity measurement in there.
And usually that thermostat's located in the hallway, right? So where I get calls a lot of times is when we start seeing humidity issues in master bedrooms that have en-suites.
It's far enough away
It's far enough. So, having a couple different monitors really will have one. If you have a basement, have one in the basement. But to let you know, and if it gets a little humid and then it dries out, wetting and drying is okay. The challenge is we're making our houses so tight and energy efficient, we're wetting, and we're not drying like we used to. And that's why old homes worked.
So what do we do? So what do we do? Because now we know this is a thing that happens, and this is the important thing that happens.
Well, obviously air leakage is number one.
Let's tighten up that building envelope. We've heard that here before.
You got to provide ventilation
for the people.
For the people, and the best way to do that is to tighten up the house as much as possible and control where you're exhausting and supplying air. So you can treat it, you can filter it, condition it.
We can bring it in where we want, and then we can do what we want to with it. Right?
Exactly.
So it's coming in everywhere. It's really hard to manage.
Yeah.
because the house is a system, and we need to make sure that we are now paying attention to, we have corralled all our air where we want it, we can do what we want to with it. We can't just leave it alone unattended. It needs to be managed, right? For builders to walk away, so what I really wanted our high performance builders to be able to walk away with was how do they integrate this whole idea into their system? Because I think it is going to be new for a lot of folks to hear, and hear maybe not hear me advocate, because I advocate for this quite a bit, but that dehumidification is a strategy you need to have a plan for. I want you thinking about this stuff. And so we're lucky because we have Nikki here who's thinking about this all the time. So, I see a lot of 16 SEER variable speed equipment, and they're like, that's fine, I've solved it, right? Like, do I still need to pair this or do I not?
Yeah. So, variable speed, there's always 70 and raining, and that one of those variable speeds is going to be off. Because if somebody walks by a register and there's cold air coming out on a cool, humid day, they're going to shut it off. And with variable speed, what's important to understand is you still have to have a load. And 2/3 of those BTUs are always going to go to sensible, always going to go to that thermostat temperature, and 1/3 to latent. So you're not getting necessarily better dehumidification with that system. You still have to have the load, and it might ramp down, but it's still going to be trying to go towards the temperature more than anything.
Right.
So, what I always tell builders is, we need to understand your ventilation strategy. In the Southeast, typically a slight positive pressure is what we go for. If you have to do balanced, you can do an ERV and then maybe add the dehumidifier for just the entire house, but you can ventilate with our dehumidifiers, with any whole house dehumidifier, and good ventilate or good filtration. MERV 13 filtration is part of that.
Perfect.
Do that, but then a lot of times if that's not an option, make sure you're starting with underneath the house. Because 50% of the air in the living space is going to come from below the house. And sometimes if you can just get a good handle on controlling that moisture and then monitoring the rest of the house, that's a great place to start.
Perfect. So we definitely want to start with your crawl spaces and your basements.
Yep.
Let's talk a little bit about ventilation, because ventilation is its own entire blog, you guys. But what I want to introduce as part of ventilation, because we're getting this question a lot, is the why of it briefly, and then why it matters that we're talking about it right now as a piece of the dehumidification piece, because a lot of you guys and gals out there still aren't ventilating. Like, I know you aren't doing it. And we do have a lot of folks that are on more of an exhaust ventilation strategy, which we know has its particular challenges in the Southeast, but certainly you add people to the mixture and it so changes so many things. So,
I mean, exhaust really in a humid climate should not be the ventilation strategy.
Right.
And I know it's the most economical. It is the most risky. And it's economical up front. But when I deal with builders, a lot of times I'm called in to solve a problem, and we always start with, you've got to stop the exhaust only if we're already having a problem, because we're just sucking in and we don't know where we're sucking that in from. So, and I think some of our leading organizations that determine our ventilation practices are even looking at maybe in certain climate zones we shouldn't be allowing certain ventilation strategies.
Right.
Because it
is risky.
It is very risky.
What we worry about is that negative pressure, and that we are, all this hard work we did to try to know where the air is and so we can do things to it. And manage it and make it healthy. When we are constantly exhausting out of the house, what we're relying on is that the air finds its way in some other way. And because we aren't, because we're sealing everything up really well, it's going to find a path of least resistance. And that's why exhaust that's why we worry about it from a building science community.
And you don't know where that
Where's
path
it coming from?
of least resistance.
Are we literally pulling humid air into our house by accident somewhere behind the walls?
Condensation in the walls or wherever. You don't know where.
You don't know.
You don't know.
So hopefully we've sufficiently made you nervous about exhaust.
Well,
even if you're still doing it, you should be nervous.
A slight positive. Even if you're doing an ERV, make sure you're getting one that you can set up on that supply side a little bit more of a positive pressure. We have so much negative with our bath fans, our kitchen hoods, our dryers. There's so much negative. We got to try to get a little bit of positive pressure in there, which is really important. And then, a lot of talk that I've been hearing more about is smart ventilation. Can I lock out certain times and conditions when I don't like the conditions outside? And we don't ventilate based on conditions outside if we really are truly ventilating for the health of the people inside.
Right, which is why we're ventilating, which this was a wonderful thing. Ventilation is not for the house. We don't need our buildings to breathe. People are in the buildings that need to breathe. People need to breathe, and they want to breathe good air. So I think I heard that at one of the building science camp, which is that little turn of phrase. It's the house doesn't need to breathe, you guys. The people do. So we do want to bring in fresh air for the people. And we want to control it. And we want to pay attention to what it's doing to the rest of the house. But because we need to bring in air for the people, we're probably bringing in moisture with it.
Moisture, and you're gonna have to heat and cool.
It's whatever temperature it is out there, and you're bringing in new air, and you're getting rid of old air, and we need to do that because of pollutants and toxins and moisture.
And and a lot of times in the southeast, if we lock out during certain conditions, and one of the big ones is when dew points are high.
Dew points are high,
so 70 degree dew point.
Hear something on the news about the dew point is high, and you're like, oh.
And so then they think, well, I'm not gonna ventilate. But the reality is, if you're in the southeast, that 70 degree dew point can last for weeks, and it doesn't change from morning to night.
Gotcha.
The temperature can change, the RH can change, but the dew points will stay the same for a 24-hour period. So then when do you ventilate?
Right. So I think I hear you saying is that if we have a smart ventilation system that has lockouts, maybe based on dew point, or maybe
then
they're going to be locked out for a while.
Well, they're going to have to make it all up at one time.
Oh, there you go.
And so when would you rather make it up? Now, here's where I think it gets interesting to me, because people are like, well, usually when you make it up, you make it overnight. Make it up overnight time. Well, the dew points are just as high as they were at 3 p.m. But now I'm not running my air conditioning.
Because it's cooler out.
Feels good. But I'm bringing in all of that air, when reality, maybe it's better to bring it in at 3 p.m. where I'm actually getting the air conditioning system to run and remove some of that moisture as well.
So because we're humid, you guys, and we would traditionally relied on air conditioning, what you're saying is it's like, if it's not running, then we're not pulling actually that moisture out. So I know
it's a challenge.
It is a challenge, and I feel like a bit of I want you to dehumidify correctly. This is my goal, and thank you so much, Nikki, for helping to share this with us. One of the main reasons why I requested Nikki come talk is because ventilating dehumidifiers feel like a really smart solution, because we are dealing with this one piece of the pie, right? Ventilation for the health of the people, and it managing the moisture that it brings in could add to the rest of the significant thing, right? So those are the two things that I really like about combining those two together. Instead of just like having them separate, but
And you get controlled humidity of the entire home.
And you can do it even when the air conditioning's not running.
Dehumidification overall is important. We need to educate more and understand it more. And have the concept of ventilating dehumidifier, I think, is just going to become more and more important. And to me, it's hitting like the sweet spot for, like, especially our climate, of how do we manage
ventilation, and what is the trade-off?
So there are different strategies.
So also, it sounds like this doesn't need to be an afterthought. It needs to be a forethought.
Forethought, yes.
You need to plan this. Even if you aren't installing it, plan for that, because as an afterthought, how much more difficult is that to like actually introduce dehumidification in a way that's going to be functional and comfortable and affordable.
And we've worked with a lot of builders that have, didn't like the warranty calls that they were getting on hardwood floors and maybe paint bubbling and that sort of stuff. So once they implemented dehumidification, a lot of that went away.
A lot of that does go away, we know.
If you have questions or anything else you'd like us
know.
to address, let us know. Otherwise, hopefully I'll be back for more.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Cheers, my friend.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Little fishies.
This is the real issue.
That are going through your crawl
This is
space.
not the job of your dehumidifier.
That is not the job of a dehumidifier.